Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Neurodiversity Awareness in Real Estate webinar. I am Vanessa Curtis. I am co-founder of AbilityRE, and I'm going to give it just a few moments as the numbers of participants are still climbing, just to give everyone a chance to dial in, and then we will kick off. So just a few minutes. While everyone is joining, I would like to point out that throughout the webinar, you can put any questions that you may have for the panelists into the Q&A box, which is probably a little black bar along the bottom that has a speech bubble and it says Q&A. Also, you do have the ability to enable the captions on this toolbar. There should be a little CC button that you can enable. And also you should be able to view the live transcript as well. So there we go. There we go. Hopefully that is now on. Can everyone see? Yes. Well, I can see the live captions anyway, so hopefully that will be helpful to people. So we'll give it 1 minute more and then I will move on and just give a very quick overview of ability in real estate before we open to our fantastic panel today. Okay, so AbilityRE. I am co-founder and co-chair of AbilityRE, which stands for Ability Within Real Estate. And we are aimed at promoting and driving and improving the general state of inclusivity within the real estate and built environment sectors for people with a disability, neurodiversity, a long-term health condition or mental ill health. And we're aiming to increase awareness across the sector and also to create opportunities, job opportunities, opportunities for progression, opportunities for people to just come together and support each other. So we have 5 points in our purpose statement. One is to create a support network for individuals and allies. We want to bring those people together, support them, let them know that they're not alone within the real estate sector if they have a disability or a neurodiversity or a long-term health condition. And we also want to leverage our combined lived experience to drive improvements within the real estate industry. And we want to create new roles, progression opportunities, and best practice that people can actually follow, you know, tangible, useful stuff that companies and individuals can roll out to help things along their way. And longer term, we want to create an industry charter that's aimed at continuous improvement that corporates can use to help them see where they're doing really well and perhaps where they could, you know, improve and work towards. We're going to achieve that through a couple of different mediums. We're going to have events. There are going to be some live events coming your way, live in-person networking events and also awareness events. We're going to carry on doing the webinars and also hopefully be releasing some podcasts in the near future. We're going to produce some toolkits and some resources that are free and available on our website. The first ones are already underway. We're working on an inclusive events guide and also an inclusive language guide that corporates can use, particularly real estate and built environment corporates, obviously, when they're producing documents, running events, that kind of thing. And as I said, then we want that continuous improvement measure, which will be a longer term goal. Just a quick plug before we move on. For those of you on the line, we've got 2 more events coming your way. We've got a fantastic event lined up for the International Day of People with Disabilities. Officially, the International Day of People with Disabilities is the 3rd, but sadly that is a Saturday. So we are doing it on Thursday, the 1st of December at RICS HQ in London, and tickets are now available for that on our website. We're also going to do a follow-up event relating to neurodiversity. That's a follow-up to this one. This event is looking at lived experience, how diagnoses of different neurodiversities can impact people. And then the follow-up event in February, which will be at JLL's offices in Warwick Street. That will be around how you can actually support neurodiversity in your workplace. So that will be looking at HR policies, procedures, governance around the design of a building, the maintenance of a building, and how we make sure that we're supporting those people to shine moving forwards. So that's just to save the date at the moment. Please plug it in your calendar. That will be an after work event, and we will be promoting that very soon. So without further ado, I'm going to open up to our amazing panel for today. We have had a very unfortunate dropout. The very wonderful Janet Sieberts, who is an executive director within CBRE, is not available to us today because sadly she has contracted horrible COVID and can't make it, which is very upsetting. So I apologize to anyone who has joined specifically with questions in their mind about ADHD. I personally do have ADHD, so if you have got questions about ADHD, although I don't plan to suddenly become a speaker, I'm more than happy to give any insight or answer any questions that you may have on that as we go through. We do have Andrew Heath, who is an associate at Radisson Hotels Group, and we have Amy Adams, who is a scientific equipment planner within CBRE's GWS. And I'm going to hand over to those amazing people now to introduce themselves and their neurodiverse condition at them personally. Okay, so there we go. Right, Andrew.
Yeah, okay. So hi, I'm Andrew Heath. I'm an Associate Director of Development for Radisson Hotel Group in the UK and Ireland. I've only been there 2 weeks. I was previously an Associate Partner at Gerald Eve within their hotels team and service apartments team, and I am dyslexic.
Hi there everyone, my name's Amy Adams. I'm a scientific equipment planner slash technician for CBRE GWS. So I work on site actually at an AstraZeneca site in Macclesfield, and I am autistic.
Okay, so I have some questions lined up for my amazing panel, but as we go along, please do put your questions in the chat. This is very much an event for you, our attendees, to understand better. First one, I'd like to ask to Amy, because I can see her, and I think Andrew's having a few tech problems, or it might just be my screen. But Amy, your autism diagnosis, or your autism, how does that affect you day to day in your work?
So mainly for me, my main issues really are sort of the social interaction with colleagues, scientists on site that I need to help with things throughout the day, and I also have to deal with quite a lot of visiting engineers, external engineers, so that can be quite difficult for me because I obviously have issues with social interaction. And another one I have is sensory overload, so false lighting, any bright lights, noise in the office, noise from the equipment within the labs can cause me problems, but also sometimes the lack of noise. If it's too quiet, that also becomes a bit of an issue for me. And I guess my final one here would probably be, I have I call it business speak or corporate language, which sometimes I just do not understand. It can be quite ambiguous and quite vague, and I need very sort of specific language. So yeah, I think that's my negative impact. But I mean, on the positive side, my autism means I'm very resourceful. I'm tenacious. I'm really good at problem solving and identifying patterns. I learn very quickly and I retain information really well. Perfectionism as well is another one, and also you always get honesty with me, so honesty and integrity.
I think honesty and integrity are amazing qualities that everyone should have. So it sounds like there's a few things that are particularly challenging with people coming in, lots of people to communicate with. You mentioned lighting as well, and sound, the hypersensitivity thing. Obviously, these are things that you have to deal with day to day in your role to be successful, which you are. So have you put in place any strategies, or have you got any cunning tips, things that you do to help you manage those?
Yeah, I mean, there's not an awful lot that can be done about lighting, but I mean, I think a lot of work can be done in a lot of places regarding sort of building design, and having dimmable lights would be really good, or having darker areas where people could go and work. But one thing that I do have, and which are my favourite ever purchase, is noise cancelling headphones. So yeah, they go on if there's too much noise, and yeah, they are my saviour.
Good tip. Good tip. Okay, cool. So Andrew, I'm going to come to you now that you're back in the room. You're on mute again. And I wanted to ask you about your dyslexia and how that impacts you day to day with your role. Hold on, I think you're having some issues. Let me just unmute you if I can. There you go. Can you unmute?
Can you hear me now?
Ah, yes, perfect.
I'm not sure what happened there. Technology still can't keep up, I see. Yeah, on a day-to-day basis, I've kind of, I've learned to deal with my dyslexia. I remember when I first started my career, I used to get very anxious, and when writing or etc. But so I think when I started, writing in meetings on screens, you type on screens in front of clients. And I remember there's nothing more soul destroying than someone pointing out a spelling mistake and then telling you the letter, not telling you where it went, or saying a couple of letters, and I'd never know where to put it, or I just see words in a different way, and that used to be very soul destroying for me. And then they're like, they kind of go, what's wrong? And I was like, I'm dyslexic, and they're like, and then you kind of have a conversation about it. But I was really fortunate. In my previous role at Gerald Eve, I had a great partner that kind of led the team, who understood my dyslexia and never saw it as a disadvantage. So I think that was a great help for me, feeling comfortable and then being able to feel a bit more confident in yourself about it. So yeah, no, I think that's kind of the day to day and how I deal with it now.
Okay, and just on that and those strategies for managing, is there any tech that you use to help you with that, or
Yeah, so I think on the strategies, I think, well, actually the kind of working from home COVID helped me a lot, because I was able to use Teams and then use two screens. So when I was presenting on one screen, I'd actually be able to have another one checking a spelling that I wasn't sure about, and I used to go, oh, sorry, the screen's frozen a bit, and then copy and paste the word in, or something that I was a bit unsure about. But in addition, working from home, writing reports, I'm able to dictate them, which is a massive advantage for me, because using that dictate function on Word or Outlook, it helps me. But you can't really do that in the office, or not easily, without going to a room, and especially with the kind of co-working spaces or open places we have is very, very different now. But I would have to say Grammarly is probably a lifesaver for me. I have it in Outlook, and it corrects my thens and weather and all those sort of words that I think for me are really easy mistakes, but I don't see them. But I've gotten used to kind of telling people that I'm quite severely dyslexic, and that nervousness around how people react has kind of gone away, because if you do it a few times and you actually realize, the client or someone will actually come up to you and say this they've struggled with something, and you kind of build that connection. That helps you build a stronger relationship with a client or a colleague. I think it can only be an advantage for everyone out there, to be honest with you.
Okay, lovely. So I'd like to go back to Amy, if I may. Amy, you have an autism diagnosis, and I'd like to ask you, if I may, about when you actually received that diagnosis, at which stage in your life you received that diagnosis, and what the impact of receiving that diagnosis was on you.
Yeah, so I was actually only diagnosed 5 years ago, so I was 32 when I was diagnosed, so it was quite late on really, but it wasn't a surprise. It made my whole life sort of make sense, and when I look back, I was like, right, okay, yeah, that's why I was like that. That's why I was so shy. I barely spoke as a child. I didn't speak to anyone really at all. And it just all made sense. But also for me, previous to being diagnosed as autistic, I had been diagnosed incorrectly with a number of mental health conditions, which I was then medicated for. So for instance, I was put on antipsychotics and all kinds of stuff, which, because I didn't need them, I was just like an empty vessel. So it was actually really good to get that diagnosis and stop taking all the medication I didn't need. So yeah, made my life absolutely a lot better getting that diagnosis.
So, I mean, if it was only 5 years ago and you were taking meds that you didn't need, well, I certainly would be very angry about that. Do you look back? What are your thoughts about the medical professions who incorrectly diagnosed you? Was it a lack of awareness on their part? How did that come about?
I think the main part of it was, so actually, I think it's family history. So for instance, my mum and a few other members of my family have got bipolar. And that, I think, is where it came from. The minute you tell somebody that, they automatically then assume that that's probably what you have as well. So I can see where it came from. And then some of the other diagnoses were so OCD, which is very close to autistic traits. So I count everything that I do. And yeah, so that was misdiagnosed as OCD. So yeah, I can see the connection. So I'm not hugely angry about it. I am angry in the fact that those diagnoses were made very, very quickly from a psychiatrist that had sat in a room with me for 5 minutes. And I'll give them a list of five conditions basically, which yeah, turned out to be incorrect.
Okay, that's sad to hear. I'm sorry about that. Andrew, question for you about your diagnosis, and when you received that diagnosis, and the impact that had on you, good or bad.
Yeah, no, I got tested when I was about 5, so quite early on in my education, but I really struggled in state school in London. I remember being in classes of 35 and getting 1 hour extra a week of help with my dyslexia. And then one of the other moments of my life, I remember going to a parents' evening when I was 7, and the teacher saying that to my parents that I would never achieve a single GCSE, and that was pretty soul destroying as a teacher telling you that. But after that, my parent, I was really fortunate. I went to a specialist dyslexic school in Somerset called Mark College, and they had a class of 10, and they really specialised education around your learning and how you learn, rather than necessarily the state system and trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, as people say. But I remember kind of when I was applying to jobs and after doing my master's and worrying whether I tick that box with are you dyslexic, and what that impact would be on my application. And I remember just kind of really worrying about it all the time. But having, when I did apply, I kind of had this moment of, if the company doesn't like me for who I am, then why am I applying to work there? So I remember Gerald Eve had an amazing process, and I admitted my dyslexia to them. They gave me a laptop in the kind of written exam. They also wanted extra time. I didn't need it, luckily, for the problem-solving activity, but it was so nice, and I felt so comfortable there. So the partnership just did so much to kind of make you feel comfortable for whatever it was you needed. So that I was quite lucky in that situation, but it was pretty brutal at first.
I can imagine. So I do have a couple more questions, but just to everyone on the line, please do put your questions for the panelists in the Q&A box. And for anyone who has joined since the opening, we have lost the amazing Janet due to COVID, but if anyone has any questions relating to ADHD, I also have that joy. So do feel free to still ask them, and I will try to answer them if I can. But what I wanted to ask you, Andrew, since you're there and you've just been speaking, is there something, one thing, top tip, or something that you wish your line manager or your colleagues knew or would do to support you?
I can't comment too much about my new job, so I'll kind of talk about my old role at Gerald Eve. You know, they did an amazing ability of making me, you know, and understand my dyslexia and allowing you an environment to thrive and develop. And I think understanding your strengths and weaknesses and not just kind of putting you down for them is key. Understanding how you work with them, because we all have strengths and weaknesses. And so I was very lucky with my previous quote line manager, Will Kirkpatrick, who was an EP at Gerald Eve. He was fantastic in helping my career and understanding me. So I'd say just be, the best thing you can ever tell people is be honest with them. If you're not honest, then you're not really honest with yourself, and you can't ask for help if they don't. You can't assume people know. And I think it's better just to be honest and tell people. So yeah, that's really all I can say.
So you are now open with your colleagues. How about your clients?
No. So I'm very much open about it. I remember one time when I was writing on a screen, one of the clients went, what's wrong with you? And when I spelt something wrong, I kept on spelling it wrong, and I was like, well, I'm dyslexic. And he was quite an aggressive tone, and after that he goes, oh, my daughter's dyslexic. And ever since then he wanted to be my best mate, but the fact that he kind of made me feel terrible wasn't the bit originally. But yeah, no, I think that's the best thing, just being honest and telling your clients, because if you do slip up on a little spelling mistake, it's not the end of the world. But we all do it, even quite non-dyslexics. We all make spelling mistakes in emails, or reports. It's just being accepting that it's not negligence or stupidity, etc.
Okay. Amy, what about you? I mean, obviously you're here and talking about your autism, but when you maybe first applied for a role, or when you first went into a new role, did you signpost to your colleagues, to your line manager about your autism, or not?
Yes. So since I got my official diagnosis, I have made it known at application stage, or as soon as I possibly can. I sort of wait for the opportunity to arise, and then I'm straight in there, by the way. So I know when I came to CBRE, I got a phone call from who would be my line manager. I didn't know that's who he was at the time. I thought he was from like HR or something. But it was I started during COVID, so he asked me how I would feel about working from home, and that was my opportunity. So I then threw in, well, actually, I work better from home sometimes because I'm autistic. So that was my opportunity, and I got in there straight away with it. So going forwards, any job applications I have in the future, I will put it out there straight away. I think it's the right thing to do for sort of both parties, for the employee and the potential employer. You can have those discussions about any reasonable adjustments that might be required for interviews, or even once you've started working there. So I get it out there.
I love it. And once you said to him, I work better from home because I'm autistic, how did he react to that?
Do you know what? He didn't really. He just went, oh, okay. And then the conversation just carried on, which was kind of good, because I thought, oh, he doesn't sound that shocked, or concerned about it. But then it was also a bit like, did he hear me? But he's actually, I've got a lovely manager, I must say. So he's been really good.
Excellent. Right, and I have a question for Andrew, and I've got a whole bunch coming through on the Q&A now, which I'm very, very happy about. But I wanted to ask Andrew about some of these new skills that they've been showing off on LinkedIn around, you know, dyslexic thinking and things like that, and how people can put that on their LinkedIn profile as a skill. And I have personally very mixed feelings about these sort of things, and I wanted to know, as a person with dyslexia, what your thoughts were.
Yeah, no, if I'm honest, I'm not the biggest fan / supporter of it. Saying dyslexic thinking as a skill makes it sound like you can teach it, or it's a supernatural gift that you have. And if I'm honest, it's not. And for instance, look at this amazing panel. We all look different. We all kind of think differently. We have our strengths and weaknesses. Thinking dyslexic is, I think, you're categorizing something that's not necessarily there, and people thinking differently is everyone thinks differently, frankly, and the key thing really is having a diverse workforce, so you all have a diverse thinking, and that's the key to kind of a successful team. So I think pigeonholing as a skill is I think slightly misleading, and I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of it. I think saying you're dyslexic is valid, and having that on there, promoting it and promoting your neurodiversity, but saying it's a skill, I think, is, for me, I would say it's misleading, because we all think differently. I hope we do, otherwise the world would be very boring.
Okay, Amy, I have a question in the chat for you, or the question in the Q&A box, around when you're actually in the workspace, do you find that you get peopled out, as it were? And if so, how do you deal with that?
Yes, I do. So myself, and I think a lot of other autistic people, and particularly females, do a lot of masking. So I very much put out a persona that I am not terrified of talking to people, even though I am. But it becomes very apparent in meetings, and I find quite a lot I never ever get the opportunity to get my point across. I get talked over quite a lot. I can't read when it is my time to come in and say something, and unless somebody says, oh, does anybody else have something to say, I find quite often I don't get that opportunity.
Okay. Right, I have an open one here. What do you think makes built environment careers a good fit for neurodivergent professionals? And what barriers do you think need to be addressed? Anyone brave enough to take that one?
I think it's a great career path because it's so diverse in its work. It's built environment, but it covers so many different aspects. So I think the fact that the industry is diverse is fantastic. But yeah, I don't know what. It was a big question. Actually, I'm trying to process it.
It was a big question, yeah. Amy, have you got anything to chip in on that one? Or?
I think I would just second what Andrew's just said there about diversity of it. Yeah. I think I can only remember the first half of that question.
It was what makes built environment careers a good fit for neurodivergent professionals, and what barriers do you think need to be addressed to make the built environment feel more accessible to neurodivergent professionals? Personal thoughts on that one. I think there are barriers in the way that the profession expects people to behave or react to certain things. There is an assumption about communication. I think we still very much go out and look for that perfect person who's brilliant at everything. Every job advert says you must be a team player, you must be a communication expert, you must be great at this, you must be great at that. And I think that is one barrier that we really do need to look at, because a lot of roles, it's almost like people take the same expectations and put them on all roles, but a lot of roles don't require those things. And I think it's time that we start putting the skills that we actually need for the job and make them, you know, and then make people feel more confident that they have those skills rather than everything else, which actually maybe isn't necessary.
Can I just add to that slightly?
Yeah.
Sorry, Andrew.
No, go ahead. No, please go.
And just to add to that, I'm just thinking about job descriptions and how the majority say you need a degree. I didn't go to university because I was too scared to go to university, because I would have to meet a load of new people, and I couldn't do that. I couldn't put myself in that position, but I still have got the ability to do that job, even though I don't have a degree. So I think, yeah, that's a huge barrier.
Okay. Andrew?
I think, you know, the COVID has given us an ability to kind of reset and think of how we work. And I think from sounds of Amy, you know, she much prefers working from home, and I like that flexibility. And I think that's probably one aspect, because I think I would quote the old guard of real estate probably want you in the office wearing a suit, and while I love wearing a suit, and you know, you don't have to be in the office, and having this kind of flexible work environment can, you know, I you know, like kind of varying my work. I'll work late at night, but then I'll work different, you know, I'll go to the gym in the day. It's having that flexibility, and that that's something that needs continual improvement. I think that you know, we don't all need to be in the office, and some people work differently and better outside the office and can contribute as much or more to the team not in the office.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. And I think one of my concerns is as we all drive to get back into the office, I mean, you know, to a certain extent, COVID was a great leveler for people with a disability or a neurodiversity. You know, previously people were told that, you know, if they couldn't get into the office, they couldn't do the job. And obviously that really impacted a lot of people. And then we suddenly found that really you could. And my worry is that inclusion might be taken away for those people with disability and neurodiversity as we try and push everyone back together in the office. So I think that's something that corporates need to think carefully about, and the balance between, you know, yes, we like it when people are together and we can get innovation and we can feel the culture and all that stuff, but at the same time, you don't have to be in an office to be brilliant at what you do. So I think it's really important that we give focus to that as we all go back to normality. Okay, so the next question in the chat from Greg is for me. It's examples of what elements in the built environment can be challenging for ADHD. So where do I begin with that one? I hate being in the middle of the office where there's stuff going on behind my back, because I get distracted by it. And if at all possible, I will find myself a desk that's somewhere in a corner or with my back to a wall, ideally not looking out of the window, although I like the daylight, but looking out of the window is a bit deadly. So when it comes to your office setup, if there are spaces for people to be like not splat bang in the middle and being distracted by everything around them. At the same time, I have hypersensitive hearing. Amy, I actually have little inner ear ones, little loop ones that kind of, they don't cancel the noise, but they reduce it so it becomes more acceptable. So yeah, the noise thresholds can be challenging for me, particularly when there's lots going on. And it's really hard if you're in a meeting and you know, when someone goes kind of robotic, when the internet, and you get that horrible noise, that's like nails down a blackboard. People will find me going like this, and I'm putting my earphones in. It's not that I can't hear them speak, I absolutely can. It's just lowering it a bit because I can hear everything. What else? Challenging for ADHD. I think communication. It's not necessarily a design element, but communication with other people. Amy, I think you flagged it. People do comment on my communication style. I get very excited. I have a hugely creative brain. I want to do loads of stuff, and then it pops into my brain and it comes straight out of my mouth. And people don't often like that approach. So I spend quite a lot of my time masking trying to filter myself, trying to figure out when I can pop up with my my input, and that's quite hard work. You feel a little bit exhausted by that at the end of the day. So for those reasons, I do like to work from home as well. I find it, you know, I like coming into the office sometimes, but I don't want to be there all the time. I like being at home as well. So Greg, I hope that answers your question. And then we have one about dyslexia. So we have someone, a participant, I think they are called on here, who also has dyslexia, and they would like to know, Andrew, about the benefits of dyslexia.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think a lot of time doing work, it will take me longer to do work than, so I would say, other people. You know, writing a report or you know, processing information. But sometimes that gives me, while my brain's working and I can think fast enough, I can't get it out onto pieces of paper as quickly. So it sometimes allows me to process or kind of think about things, you know, kind of process information differently, or just take a little bit more on to give myself time. So I think that's something that I kind of think's a benefit for me. It might not be always the same for everyone else, but also I do find, because I hate writing passionately, I will always much prefer to speak to someone on the phone or meet for a coffee. So usually, you know, I do prefer, I think my social skills are a lot better than my verbal, you know, written skills in email. So I'd rather pick the phone up and have a chat with them, or have a video meeting, or meet face to face. So those sort of building those relationships can be a good thing. So some of those client front roles can really be kind of good for dyslexic people, I think. Usually without stereotyping, you know, quite sociable people. So I think that's always a benefit. So staying away from emails is always my my advantage. That's a massive advantage for me.
I think that's a massive advantage too. And then we've had a question on the best sources of finding out information and the needs of groups with neurodiverse needs. So Andrew, I'd say this is quite a challenging one, and probably one of the very reasons that AbilityRE was founded, is that there's a huge amount of information out there. Quite often there are lots of stuff from lots of different charities that are focusing on one specific condition rather than inclusivity as a whole. And I think there are also a lot of people putting things out in this space on social media who, you know, maybe it wouldn't be considered best practice. I've seen a few things popping up on LinkedIn that, you know, have made me frown. So there are some very reliable sources of information. You've mentioned in your question about your working groups and things like that. Obviously, your employees, if they are able to share what's working well, what would really help them, what they would like you to look at, if they've had a bad experience, how could it be better? That is an amazing resource, and I would encourage all companies to have that that network, or that EBRG, that employee business resource group, or whatever you want to call them. But yes, the fact is there's a lot out there, and it changes quite frequently, and that is one of the reasons that we formed AbilityRE. So drop me a note if you want to know more about the stuff we're working on. We have a question from Amy, who has asked us about the fact that, you know, you've obviously been comfortable to share your experience and your diagnosis with your employer, but she's saying, is there anything that was missing from your onboarding process that could have made it easier or more efficient for you? Amy, you can go first on that one if you like.
Yes, it's the simple answer to that. It's basic stuff like, where do I go when I arrive on my first day? And that for me is a huge thing. Where am I going to park? That parking is big problems for me. If I get really stressed about that, and that can ruin my entire day. Once I've parked, where am I going? Who am I going to speak to? Who do I ask for? And all this sort of stuff. But actually in CBRE at the moment, I'm actually part of the Neurodiversity Committee, and we're trying to make the recruitment process a little bit more inclusive. And we're going to be working on stuff like creating videos to show what happens when you arrive, you know, show you the way around the building via video and everything like that. So there's a lot that can be done to make it a lot better and a lot more accessible for everybody, and it's all quite easy to do. And I think covering everything, so, you know, including closed captions on your videos and all that kind of stuff, and just making sure that you're being inclusive to everybody.
Andrew?
Yeah, I think for me it was kind of about the kind of technology piece. So can you pre-install software for you know, onboarding people, so it can Grammarly, even the free version, be kind of pre-installed. I don't know why it's not pre-installed on everything, or drag and dictate, or, you know, just making sure that that tech piece is there, especially now in this day and age. It's making sure it's already on there, and not you having to seek out it, or that, you know, it's on a portal that you can just download automatically. You don't have to get administrators' permission from IT, and then it goes to your line manager, or if, you know, something you're not comfortable sharing, but you want to seek the help. I know processes can be quite hard in companies sometimes, but, you know, it's making sure that that piece is really easy for everyone.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that, and it's something that I've been looking at within CBRE with the network is, you know, how can you kind of tell people what is out there to support them. But in terms of the onboarding, my personal view is we just need to be more individual in our approach. So right from the very first interaction, we should be asking people, you know, is there anything I can do to support you? What would help you do your job really well? What, you know, what would make your life easier? And that shouldn't be a one-off conversation. If someone has openly shared a challenge or a diagnosis or whatever, that should be an ongoing conversation. They should have the right to be able to come back, you know, or feel comfortable to come back and review it in 6 months' time and say, actually, you know, I thought this was really going to help me, but it hasn't. What else can we do? And feel confident to do that. And I personally think that that is really important as well.
Yeah, sorry, I'm chipping again, but I totally agree with that. Ask that person what reasonable adjustments they may need, and, like you say, review it, because something that I might think is going to help me I might change my mind about that in 6 months, or something else might have come available that is going to help more. So yeah, I'll definitely agree with that. Everyone is individual, so ask that person what they need. Don't try and make that decision for them.
I would agree. Okay, next question we've had is around ADD and a bit of an office drinking culture, and trying to balance the office drinking culture with the taking of medication. I'm not sure I can help with that. I think real estate generally can have a bit of a drinking culture, but I can take my medication with alcohol. That one doesn't present me personally as much of a problem. I know there are lots of different medications out there. Amy, is there anything that you've ever experienced that with meds at all?
So I have been put on some medication that you shouldn't drink on. I do take medication currently. Not anything too interesting at the moment, but I can also drink on mine, so that's not too much of an issue.
Oh dear. Okay. To the person who popped that question in the chat, if you want to contact us at AbilityRE, we will go away and see what we can find out for you. I'm sorry we haven't been able to answer that one with the people on the call. Amy, we've got another question for you on working from home and how that works for you and why it's beneficial.
Okay, so I don't actually work from home anymore. In fact, I never did. It was thought that I was going to be working from home. I have to be on site every single day due to the nature of my role. However, in previous roles, working for different companies, I have worked from home permanently. And I'm more productive when I work from home, I think, because a bit like you, Vanessa, I get very distracted by other people and things going on around me. So, yeah, I work longer and more productive at home. I'm not even sure I'm answering this question now. Can you just
It was just expanding more on kind of how it helps, why it's best.
Yeah, so for me, like I say, social interaction is my sort of main issue, and actually the office environment of the lighting. And even recently, for example, they put a load of bright white desks in our office. I cannot go anywhere near those white desks. It's just like, it's like an absolute attack on all of my senses. All the light reflects off the white desks, the contrast with the black PCs and stuff. So at home, I am far more comfortable. I can turn the light off if I want to. I can make some noise or make some noise go away if I need to. Yeah, it's just those home comforts reduce stress levels massively.
Yeah, I would agree. I'd probably come in on that and say for me, it's also about the fact that I spend a lot of energy when I'm in the office masking. And for anyone on the call who doesn't know about masking, that's basically where those of us with neurodivergency spend a lot of time pretending that we're not. There's a lot of energy goes into this and trying to moderate the way we interact to what we think people expect, or moderate the way we speak to what we think people expect. And at the end of the day, that can really be very exhausting and can, if it's compiled over time, contribute to burnout. So I would add, you know, I just have so much more control over my setting at home. And I can speak to people and then I can turn it off. Or I can, you know, not have the light on. You mentioned the light. Also, like, you know, those flickering lights, I can't abide that. When the light bulb's flickering, it really, and smells as well. I'm very funny about, I've got hyperactive smells. So if people are microwaving food, it's just a general sensory overload. And I'm quite fortunate that I can manage it a lot in the office. You know, I've mentioned my little sneaky earplugs. I've got my hair down. People don't generally even know I'm wearing them. But it is just easier and more comfortable for me to expend all my energy actually into my work at home than it is in the office. Although I am quite a social person. I do like seeing people as well. So it's a bit of a getting the right balance. Andrew.
I just want to add, I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of the open desk policy and kind of you can sit wherever you want. It's quite, for me, I do like sitting in my own space that's set up in the right way with, you know, the right technology, you know, having different mice, different microphone, etc. And that stress every morning, you don't know where you're going to sit, who you're going to sit with. Are they going to be some random that you have to make conversation, feel awkward and make conversation with the other day? So, you know, it's I know we pushed for this cool, funky Google, Amazon workspace, but, you know, it doesn't always need to be that way sometimes.
I would agree. Okay, next question I have is for thoughts of around parents of children that have similar neurodiverse difficulties and what support there should be in the workplace for them, as the balancing act is very hard to manage. I can also come in on this one if you'd like, but I will first ask Amy and Andrew if there are anything, you know, any personal, I don't even know if you have children, any personal experience. Okay, I'm going to take this one.
I'm afraid not.
Okay, so I have 2 children. My eldest has been diagnosed with ADHD and autism, and my youngest is on a waiting list for an ADHD assessment, and obviously I have ADHD as well. It's really challenging. I would completely agree with you. The whole pain of trying to get the right support for your child. It's almost like you have to fight the NHS for the resources to support your child. And quite often what happens is they give you a lovely bit of paper that says what they have. And then they're like, well, that's what it is, off you go. And there's no support for how you can then best support that child to achieve their best and become their best self. Moving forward from that, it's as if the diagnosis itself is enough. and it's not. So you're right, there is a big challenge in balancing everything you need to do as a parent of a neurodiverse child with the workplace. Again, I think this comes down to sort of people, policies, procedures within HR teams. I know a lot of people have kind of basic carers leave type policies, but I think if you are the parent of a neurodiverse child, might have been excluded a couple of times as well, that's really challenging because all of a sudden they're not going to school, and what do you do? So it's really hard, and I think it's down to open conversations. If you are fortunate enough to be able to have that conversation with your line manager or your HR person, but then also making sure that the organisation has those policies and procedures to support people who are, struggling with things at home. Because let's face it, whether or not you are the parent of a neurodiverse child, everyone will have something going on in their personal life at some point that they will need to be able to deal with and balance alongside the challenges of work. So we just need to make sure, particularly as kind of the work and like home life boundaries, almost vanish, that we're making sure that we are allowing people and empowering people to build in the time to do the things that, are really important. Okay, I've got a question about Amy. I've got a question for Amy, and the process that you went through to be diagnosed for autism, and what the steps are to get there.
Okay, so it's not easy, particularly when you're an adult. But mine sort of came about. I basically had a breakdown, and that's how it started. I was overloaded with work at work, and my mind just went, and I just couldn't. I just had to stop, and I basically ended up getting signed off work for 2 months with depression and anxiety, and I then got referred to the mental health team. That's where all the initial incorrect diagnosis came from, and then it happened again about 6 months later. Again, I got signed off again for 2 months. By this point, I'd moved to a different area of the country, and I went to a different mental health team, and they started asking me questions about what books did I read as a child, and was it fact or fiction, and was I good at maths, and this, and they started asking me these questions, and I just thought instantly, you think I'm autistic? Because I started to think it myself. Basically from there, got referred again to a different psychiatrist, and they said, I don't think you've got any mental health problems as such. We need to go down the autism diagnosis route. So I was eventually referred to an adult autism diagnosis group based in Chester, and they had to travel over from Chester to come and see me. I got interviewed by a professor and an occupational therapist. They interviewed both me and my mum. So they interviewed us both together at one point, and then they interviewed us separately. It was a bit like a police interrogation, I'm not going to lie, like being taken off into different rooms. But yeah, and then I waited about 6 months and finally received the report, which was very long, I might add. And yeah, that was that. So they also thought I might also have ADHD, but unfortunately the NHS wouldn't provide the funds to get that assessment done. So yeah, it's a very long and arduous process. I think it took about 3 to 4 years in total. So it takes a long time, and I had to do a lot of pushing. Yeah.
Yep.
Hard work.
I would back that experience as well for both me and for my children. It took at least 3 years to get Ben's ADHD diagnosis, and then he was put on another waiting list, and it was 3-4 years for autism, which is ridiculous, frankly. Myself, I was fortunate enough with the ADHD to be able to go private, but even then it was still nearly 2 years in the making going private, because the waiting lists at the moment are crazy. To the person who answered that question, I would say if you work for an organisation who have a health plan, like a private health plan, it might be worth looking at that to see if diagnoses are covered. Also, a lot of organizations, again, it varies company by company, but if you speak to your HR person, they can do a kind of in-work assessment of, and then they can make recommendations or refer you to people. So it might be worth, given the pressures on kind of the general routes through the NHS and stuff, having a look at any private healthcare policies, or what your HR team in your company can support you with, or at least help you part way. Because if you get a referral, then hopefully that will fast track it a bit for you. Otherwise, I would say there are some forms online that you can do and give to your GP that can initiate that conversation. And I'm more than happy to pick up offline if you want to send an email to AbilityRE on kind of some of those routes. So I've also got a question here about the panel's thoughts on running awareness events regionally, as London isn't always accessible due to the distance. I agree. I'd love to run them regionally, but I'm in London. Panel's thoughts. Anything?
I guess having these webinars is always great, because that means you can join from wherever. So that's always, I think I actually really like webinars. I think they're great. You can have one, even if you have one in the background, you don't necessarily need to participate fully, but you can have one and you can always learn something, or get insight into something. So I think webinars are great, and I'm sure you'd love to host them anywhere in the world if you could, but it's probably not feasible.
I would totally agree with Andrew. And personally, for me, a webinar is much easier than doing it in person. But I actually got invited to something this week for Inclusion Week that was only in London. Well, so yeah, I get it, but yeah, I think make use of the technology that we have.
Yeah, I would entirely agree. The technology really does help. I think from a personal perspective, I chair the Ability Network within CBRE, and I would say that it's sometimes really hard to get the critical mass outside of London, depending on where all of your employees are based. And at the moment, everyone's looking at costs and budgets and things like that. And I would say, maybe webinars are easier, although it's always lovely to meet people and run networking events and things online. I mean, in person, but maybe the awareness events have to be online, unless you've got that kind of critical mass of employees all based in one site further up north, so you can host them there. Open question. Do you find that your diagnosis makes you less sociable at work, or social at work, sort of events, social gatherings? And do you think of this as a problem?
I mean, I'll quickly say, for me, it's not an issue. I mean, I'm probably more social than so yeah, I'd say the opposite for me. I don't know what Amy's thoughts are.
Well, I'm not going to lie, I try to avoid sort of work events as much as possibly can, because it doesn't always end well. And yeah, so actually for me, being so open about being autistic with all my colleagues and anyone I work with, I can say, well, I'm not coming, because it's not for me. And then they don't badger me then. It's just, you don't get, come on, just come for a few drinks. No. So it sort of is a bit of a get out clause for me.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm quite a sociable person, would be my I am a sociable person, and I do like interacting with people. I think the challenge for me was the children, not the neurodiversity, to be honest. That definitely puts a crimp in your social life. I'm really sorry, this has flown, but we're at 1 o'clock. And I'm conscious of everyone's time. There are still a whole bunch of questions in the chat that we haven't been able to answer. I am hoping to be able to do a mini write-up of some of the key topics that have been covered today, and I will attempt to address some of the questions in the chat that we haven't got to when we do that. But I would like to take this opportunity now just to thank our very amazing panel. Amy and Ash have been fantastic, sharing your lived experience with us, and I'm incredibly grateful for your openness, the both of you, and how you've shared your personal experiences with us. And yes, final plug for our 2 events that are forthcoming: International Day of People with Disabilities and Supporting Neurodiversity in the Workplace. Thank you for attending. I'm going to close the call.